Dana, like when
Yeah,
you describe it like that, it sounds exhausting, right?
it
Like if
is.
you were a narcissist, it's like this is exhausting getting your validation externally all your life.
It is, but look at how many people and everybody listening can think of somebody that has to have the name brand clothes and has to drive that Cadillac or Land Rover or whatever. They have to wear, they feel important by having things that give them a perceived status that they don't really have. And even if they do, they just want that kind of attention. Now, on the other hand, there's the narcissist that I married and spent 25 years with, which is more of what we call a covert narcissist. This is
25
somebody
years, Dana,
I spent
you look like
25
you're about
years.
30 years old. What do
Well,
you
thank
mean?
you.
You
It's
married when you were
makeup and
5.
lighting. No.
Okay.
It's makeup and lighting. It's that narcissistic quality in me to look good on camera.
Okay.
This covert narcissist was more humble. He was, I always likened him to the character Eeyore on Winnie the Pooh. That was, slumped shoulders and always with the drooped head saying, "Poor me."
Hi, my name is Luella Young. I'm a psychotherapist and coach. And if you're interested in how your lifestyle is affecting your mental health, then you're at the right place. On this show, I interview various guests from across the miles and share how their lifestyle choices affects their sense of self, their wealth, and most importantly, their health. Enjoy the show. Hello, welcome back to I Think I Can. As usual, I have a wonderful guest who's going to give us her knowledge and her experience in breaking free from a narcissistic relationship. Her name is Dana, and she is a wife, mother, and author of the best-selling book, Gasping for Air: The Strange Hold of Narcissistic Abuse. Sorry, the stranglehold of narcissistic abuse. As a lifelong victim of narcissistic abuse, Dana has made it her mission to speak up for those who are afraid or ashamed to do so themselves and speak out against abuse altogether, while also creating awareness. She strives to be an example of she strives to be an example as well of the ability to overcome and thrive regardless of one's circumstances. So, as a therapist myself, God knows I've had enough. I'm not going to say so. I haven't had a lot of a narcissistic individuals in my therapy room, but I have had many individuals in my therapy room that have been victims of narcissism. So your work is so important. And I love the fact that you're tying the whole idea of, you know, br- like ridding the shame that surrounds so many of my clients as well. When, it's all about like, how could I have let this happen to me? So that as well as gaining like helping people to gain their awareness of what actually is narcissism, because that's the other thing that I'm seeing is that a lot of people use the term but don't understand what what a true narcissist actually is. A person might have narcissistic tendencies, but like, I mean, hey, being diagnosed with this illness is a whole different story. So welcome, Dana. That was a long introduction.
That's okay. Thank you so much. I mean, honestly, I'm like a doll that you just pull the string because I'm ready to go based on what you just said.
Okay, okay.
I appreciate what you said about people having narcissistic qualities, but not necessarily being narcissists, because the term is used very loosely anymore to just refer to somebody that you just don't like.
Exactly.
And that's not really what narcissism is. So let's go back to the root of the word. Narcissus was a Greek god. He loved to look at his reflection in the water because he looked so good. And we see those people, we know those people. They really do think they look as good as they really do actually look most of the time. So they're not bothering anybody with it. They might be annoying you on social media with all their selfies, but really they're not harming anybody at all. They just really do look good. So that is really what narcissism is, but what it has come to mean in current times, and what the true meaning is somebody that feels that they should be held to a higher regard than what than everybody else. Basically, it actually comes from more of a deep-seated insecurity in themselves. They have shame or something unhealed within them that, often they don't even like themselves really. So they need other people to reflect to them this idea that they are so much more superior than everybody else. They are so much more important, but it comes in different shapes and sizes, because on the one hand, like I think about my childhood, the first narcissist in my life, not that I knew what it was back then, was my stepfather who raised me. He was one of those people who had to have the name brand car. If the neighbor got a TV, he had to get one that was bigger. He had to make sure everybody knew what we had and what they couldn't have and what they would never have, because he was the best, the greatest, knew everything. We all know that kind of a person.
Oh my God. Yeah, Dina, like when
Yeah.
when you describe it like that, it sounds exhausting, right?
It
If
is.
you were a narcissist, it's like, this is exhausting, getting your validation externally all your life.
It is, but look at how many people, and everybody listening can think of somebody that has to have the name brand clothes and has to drive that Cadillac or Land Rover or whatever. They have to wear, they feel important by having things that give them a perceived status that they don't really have. And even if they do, they just want that kind of attention. Now, on the other hand, there's the narcissist that I married and spent 25 years with, which is more of what we call a covert narcissist. This is
25
somebody
years, Dana,
I spent
you look like
25
you're about
years.
30 years old. What
Well,
do you
thank
mean?
you.
You
It's
married when you were
makeup and
5.
lighting. No,
Okay.
it's makeup and lighting. It's that narcissistic quality in me to look good on camera.
Okay.
So, this covert narcissist was more humble. He was, I always likened him to the character Eeyore on Winnie the Pooh. That was, slumped shoulders and always with the drooped head saying, poor me, I'll never have this. And he would bait me by feeling sorry for himself and making, self-deprecating comments. He would bait me into pumping him up and to being his cheerleader and to wanting him to be happy, thinking, okay, well, I'll go make this happen for him. He will have it, and then everything will be wonderful. And it was never that way. It didn't matter how much we attained, which everything, and I go through this in my book, everything this man ever wanted, I made sure, to give him and to provide for him and to figure out how to get it. I was resourceful. I was smart. I also think that he saw me as a resource. And I saw that early on, even before we got married, because, he saw, unfortunately, what my narcissistic stepfather was. Look at my Corvette, look at my big house, look at all this money and things that I have, even though they didn't really, I mean, they had the things, but it did, that doesn't mean you have the money necessarily. But I
Yeah.
think my then, boyfriend, husband saw it as an opportunity to gain those things through me, not knowing that there was a very strained relationship between me and my mother and my stepfather, and we're completely estranged now. So none of that would ever become mine, nor would I ever want it, because it felt dirty to me. I just wasn't that kind of a person. But regardless, this narcissism that we're talking about, What makes it so dangerous is this, because I want to be clear about this. Even though I'm describing my ex this way, it doesn't make him harmful. Again, annoying, bothersome, maybe, not necessarily harmful. However, there are some narcissists, which we call malignant narcissists, that will go to any and all extremes to feel what they need to feel to fulfill their ego. And this was the man I was married to, unfortunately. Where some narcissists are annoying and bothersome, I liken them to tumors. Like you could have a benign tumor, it's there, it is what it
Mhm.
is, doesn't make a difference. But then you have that malignant tumor that causes you problems. You need to surgically remove it, cut it out of your life, cut it out of your body. Otherwise, it might even kill you.
Mhm.
This is exactly what a malignant narcissist is. These are the people that are comprising over 20% of the US male prison population. These are the people that we see on these true crime shows like 48 Hours, that have murdered their ex or their wife or whatever it is, whether it's for money or because of, some insult or whatever it is. These are dangerous people. Do they always want to kill? Do they always kill? No, but they will use any and all abuses to achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve. And that's why people say, I don't believe in narcissistic abuse. Well, it's not because it's necessarily a type of abuse. All it is when a narcissist abuses you. The problem is that it's not what just sexual abuse or verbal abuse or physical abuse. It's all of those things, including legal abuse, financial
Mhm.
abuse. They use gaslighting. They use coercive control, brainwashing. I mean, anything and everything. And even the verbiage that we use in the realm of narcissism is actually military verbiage because that's what it feels like. I mean, I've described it. People say it's like walking on eggshells being in that kind of relationship. And I'm like, no, it's like a minefield because I never knew. Even if I was stepping very carefully, something would blow up in my face. It was always my fault. Everything would come back to me. I would pay for whatever transgressions he felt I caused and everybody else's. I mean, God forbid if somebody looked at him wrong, then I would pay for it when he got home. I was literally the punching bag. But, at the end of the day, getting from point A to point B is what makes it so scary. Because in the beginning, it was just the verbal, it was just a little coercion, it was a little manipulation. It was, okay, the first thing got thrown across the room at me. All right. Didn't like it, crossed a little bit of a boundary, but not enough that it was a deal breaker for the relationship. But when they get away with that little bit of something and they have a moral compass, they know that they're doing something wrong. They know they've gotten away with it. So the next time they push the boundary a little more and they push it a little more. It's kind of like gaining weight. You don't notice that 1 pound and then the extra two. And 5 years later, you're like, how did I gain 10 pounds? Well, it was the same thing. From point A, when that CD first flew across the room 3 weeks into our relationship, to the end of 25 years when he threatened my life and we have guns and knives and police and restraining orders. Like, how did we get here? This
Mhm.
wasn't the type of life that I had ever thought I'd live. I wasn't that kind of a person. And it was almost surreal to think that we had gotten to that point. But that is what it feels like to be in a narcissistic relationship. And all the while, you are confused because you're made to think that it's your fault, that if you were better, they wouldn't have to act that way, that if you just followed the rules and did all the things to their liking,
Mhm.
none of this would happen because you do get rewarded. There are good times.
Mhm.
There are times when there at least seems to be love and affection and sacrifice and exchange and so then you wonder, is it real? Which part of him is real, or her, as the case may be? You start getting very confused about what's what, and then you're internalizing all this other stuff and wondering what your part in it is.
Mhm.
So it can be
It's
very damaging to the psyche.
I was going to
Yeah.
say it is a form of real emotional trauma, like a
Oh yeah.
real mental manipulation because of that the peppering in of, the good times or certain
Yes.
acts where, so yeah, so then you keep on going through your head. It's like, yeah, but they did, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
but yeah, yeah,
You hold on to that hope. I mean, for
yeah.
me, I think I can say that of being good to me. He was capable of being a good partner. So again, I was looking at the bad times and saying, okay, so I have to make these bad times lessen or minimize them in some way. So if I'm better, he has to be better, right? Because that's what a
Hmm.
dynamic is between two people. If you do the same thing, they're going to have the same reaction. Well, if you don't do that, if you change your behavior, they have to change their reaction. That's how it's supposed to go.
Right.
But nothing I did. And I was walking a very straight line and trying so hard through different things to be everything he wanted me to be. And, that I saw too, is I think that was done purposefully because, by the end, I felt like I was a Stepford wife and I didn't even know who I was anymore.
Mm.
I was living a life that he had created in his head, I guess, for both
Yeah.
of us by dictating to me verbally and non-verbally how I should be, because this is what's going to please him. This is what's going to meet his approval, and this is not. So I would learn,
Hmm.
what to do and what not to do. Which I hate to say sounds manipulative in itself, but I was trying to get more of those good times. I was trying to get it to where we were having those good times. It just took me that long to realize that, okay, but if there are good times and there are bad times, there's obviously a choice for him because he could just choose to be a better person. He could just choose to be a better husband, like I was trying to choose to be a better wife, but he didn't. He was still always the same, and it felt very stagnant, and it felt very unsettling and inauthentic to me by the end when I realized that nothing of our life was anything that I wanted, and it wasn't natural to me at all to be living it.
Okay, so Dina, let's pretend that you both are in my room as a couple. What do you think he and let's say, I asked you what you were going through and you sort of presented the same thing that you did to me just now, using a lot of courage and etc. How would he respond to that?
He would negate it. We actually did do marriage counseling for a short time, but I learned very quick in the first session that it was his opportunity to complain about me. His biggest complaints being that he didn't have clean socks as often as he would have liked.
I
He
can see that being a huge
Yeah,
huge
and the
wedge.
water bowl, that was the other thing. I remember sitting there thinking, the dogs were always flipping the bowl for more water, and it irritated him because I wasn't sitting there filling the water at their every desire, and he wouldn't lift a finger to do that either. But that was my fault, and we were paying thousands of dollars for the therapist to tell us to go buy one of those automatic waters
Oh
where
my
it
God.
continuously feeds water. Yes, that was the result of marriage counseling. But given your theoretical concept, I would have been terrified to say everything I just said in front of him because I would go home and meet either silent treatment for a few weeks or some other act of disapproval, which wouldn't be in my favor. So if I spoke that, though, he would absolutely have negated it. He would have turned it around. He did call me crazy quite often. He made me feel that I was quite delusional to the point that
Mhm.
I did go to a psychiatrist on my own, worried that maybe I was. And I
Mhm.
was worried because he made me feel like I was unfit to take care of our son. And I went home with 2 mood stabilizers for bipolar disorder
Oh my
um,
gosh.
that I took for 17 years just to find out after the divorce that um, it was a
Wow.
diagnosis that was retracted. They realized that I was just having natural, reasonable reactions
Mhm.
to abuse, but I had never revealed what was really going on. The psychiatrist knew
Mhm.
I was not happy in my marriage, but I never divulged what was really going on. So I haven't been on those meds, and I'm not considered bipolar at this point, and I don't think I ever was or am. And even if so, I mean, it's a wonder that I would have come out of something like that unscathed. But he absolutely, if I confronted him about anything, it was don't bring up the past. Why do you have to always live in the past? Why can't you live in the present?
Mhm.
Which was his way of trying to just avoid talking about it at all. If I tried to get him to talk about his part in anything, he would say that he was just joking when he said that, or that I misinterpreted what he said. Um, for example, something that did come up was that we had both agreed not to be on social media. And I found out through an admission he made to me as one of my cousins was walking down the aisle in her wedding ceremony, because, of course, it's a public place where any reaction I would have would have been considered all the
Mhm.
crazy he was making me out to be. He admitted that he had a Facebook page. Well, I found out, no, he had two Facebook pages, two, not just one. And when we did get home and I confronted him about that, he said, well, do you not want me to work? Do you not want me to have friends? Am I supposed to give up my
Mhm.
social life for you? So he always had that way of turning it around,
Yeah.
without taking accountability. And I think that's what most narcissists do, is that it's about avoiding accountability,
Yeah.
including avoiding accountability for whatever shame or unhealed trauma they have that they are
Right.
now putting and burdening their victims with.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Avoiding, yeah, defending, avoiding, like talking about, like just projecting it, like not even like momentarily taking it on their own,
Not the
just like
slightest.
right back at you. Like it's just, yeah, it's all about you. Like every conversation seems to be all about you, Dana, right? Like
Right.
yeah, yeah. So, okay. Well, and like taking mood stable, that's like a psychotropic drugs. Like, I mean, that's not a fun ride.
No, I think
No.
that's a lot of it's interesting because people ask me all the time, especially after reading the book, and the
Yeah,
book didn't even cover everything, but
no,
after reading a lot of the experiences that I have, people say, well, if it was so that bad, if that all really happened, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you leave sooner? And I think a part of it was because of the mood stabilizers.
mm-hmm,
I was on Seroquel and clonazepam.
mm-hmm,
So Seroquel's a pretty hard hitter,
mm-hmm,
especially the dosage that I was on. And it made me, I remember feeling very numb. Like there were
mm-hmm,
times where I felt like I felt a certain way inside, like I felt like I should have strong feelings, but I was made to feel so even. At one point, I even had somebody that I worked with say, you're like a zombie. You're very
yeah,
cold, but she says, you're not a cold person.
mm-hmm,
I know you, but and I knew what was going on, but I figured it was just as well because I thought I was doing the noble thing, staying to keep my son's family intact. And, again, there were some good times. He didn't always hate me.
right,
He did love
right,
me once in a while. It was just this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde aspect,
mm-hmm,
and I was very close with his family. His sister was my best friend. His
mm,
mother and father were the parents that mine never wanted to be to me.
mm,
um,
mm-hmm.
I
You
wasn't
become
just
a
going to
bit of a
walk away
code.
from all that. Oh, I
Yeah,
was absolutely codependent. I'm not even going to hide that.
no,
But I appreciate, when you introduced me and we're talking about that, that's one thing I do want to say. Bipolar has such a stigma. Taking medications, being codependent, even people are ashamed of that. I think, and thank goodness, I don't want anyone to feel that way. Whatever I am or whatever I'm not, I'm who I am because of the experiences I've had in my life and because of the reactions I have felt to what people have done to me. That doesn't make me a bad person, though.
No.
I'm not going to be ashamed for who I am because I'm good with I have a good heart. I have good qualities. But I
Mm-hmm.
think everybody, every single person in this world, even the people who, look down upon mental health, so to speak, have their own issues as well. And
Oh
I'm
God,
not going
yeah.
to shy away. And it pains me when people will go through whatever trauma or whatever difficulties and say, oh, I'm broken and I'm damaged. And
Mm-hmm.
you're not broken or damaged. You're affected. You might have
Yeah.
a couple scratches. Our jeans get worn, shoes get scuffed,
Yeah.
people get hurt, but that does not define who you are. And it
No.
doesn't make you any less or any more than anybody else. So I want
Mm-hmm.
people to really understand that if they can relate to any of what I just said, because I think once you get, especially when you get the key factor that the people that hurt you really have unhealed trauma or unhealed issues of their own that they're putting on you because they don't want to deal with it. Once you realize that it's not you, like they're making you think,
Yeah.
I think that that's the key to releasing that shame and just accepting who you are. And we have to look at mental health just like physical health. I mean, we all have a pound or two. We want, we could have tighter abs, we could have more muscular legs if
Mhm.
if that's what you want. But your mind is the same thing. Your mental health is the same way. We all have areas of it that we could probably improve. Whether we do or not is up to us. It
Mhm.
depends on your priority. But you should never feel ashamed about any way that you have been made to feel about yourself because you are still you. You are still a valid, worthy, deserving human being that is capable of having quality connections and good relationships with people. You just have to be a little more careful about who you choose to have relationships with.
Exactly. Well said. Um, what was your primary, like, I mean, you mentioned a son, so I'm guessing that that is one big thing that kept you back from
Yeah.
doing it sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, he held our son over my head from day one. My ex hadn't wanted children at all. And having my son, um, that
Mm.
that was kind of the beginning of the end for sure,
Mhm.
because now I had to give my focus and attention to this newborn baby instead of sitting there like a puppy waiting for its next command,
Mhm.
with my ex. And I mean, literally, he was, I think he liked it for a short time because it was, oh, look at my wife, my son, there
Mhm.
was that possession. He
Mhm.
loved having a hold on us. Um, but then it was stop the baby from crying, shut the baby up. Why are you giving the baby so much attention? Oh, well, then it turned into, again, he was a covert narcissist. So he would turn things around to where I would
Mhm.
feel guilty. He started making threats upon his life. I remember the first time our son was 3 months old, and he said, my ex said to me that if I don't matter to him, then it won't matter if he just kills himself. And he locked himself in the bedroom, and I was worried. I mean, here
Mhm.
I'm no matter what had gone on between us and how I felt, I don't want to be the reason somebody does
Right.
that. That
No.
that would hurt my heart too much. But here I am, like, here's a 3-year-old or a 3-month old, excuse
Mhm.
me, who needs me, who is dependent on me. Do I go in there and risk that? I mean, here's a man with a gun.
Yeah.
Do I go in there and risk getting shot? Do I go in there honestly, I was scared that he might do one of these family murder suicide things, and
Gee.
it's a very scary thing when a narcissist feels slighted.
Mm.
But I would always choose my son. And I did choose my son that day. And I got us the heck out of that house and just drove. I wasn't even going anywhere in particular. I just didn't want my son in the crossfire um, of whatever would happen, whether it ended up with a gun situation or not. But it's unfortunate because looking back, I wish that I would have followed my gut. I wish that I would have left and raised my son without all of the tension and hostility that he witnessed. I'm glad that in the 17 years of his life that we all lived under the same roof, that he only witnessed a portion, maybe a third of what was really happening. He didn't see all the texts and the emails. He wasn't witness to a lot of the physical assault and the other threats and the other things going on. So I'm glad for that, but I still don't think he, came out unscathed from everything.
No.
Fortunately, he, the way I handled it with him was just when something would happen, I would go to him and just let him know. I didn't want to push him, but I would just let him know,
Yeah.
we all are aware of what happened. If you want to talk about it, I'm happy to talk about it. And as he got older, he would say things to me. Being a boy and I'm mom, they tend to clam up.
Yeah.
They're not that forthcoming. But when he would say stuff to me, or when he would say, well, dad told me you did this or you said this, I would neither confirm or deny. I stand by how I handled things, which I still handle things with him this way, which is the relationship between your dad and I is between me and him. I'm not going to discuss it with you. You just need to be a kid and worry about your life. But if there's anything you're feeling that I can be here for you, that you want to vent or talk about, I am here because, and every time I would tell him, I love you. No matter what happens, just remember I love you. And just make sure that he knew that he didn't have to feel ashamed or feel any certain way. It's just sad that he did, because he did make comments to me from about 8, 9 years old up from there, that he didn't want to be the kid at school whose dad was in jail. So please, mom, don't call the cops on him. I don't want to be the kid whose dad is a drunk, and so don't tell. And but it's just unfortunate that some of his friends would witness things at our house too, and they would go home and tell their mothers, or a few of them left our house crying and screaming, begging to go home. So I'd have to call their mothers a little frantically. So people were kind of aware stuff was happening at our house, but we just didn't talk about it. We didn't make it public. We just kept it to ourselves. And again, I would just remind my son, I love you. We'll get through this. I think I maybe overcompensated a little too much with him, but I still wanted him to live that normal life. So we still did things on our own and experienced joy. And I wanted to show him that no matter what happens, we can still laugh and we can still have a good time.
Yeah. Okay. So how old was he? Was 17 when and how did the separation divorce happen? Like how?
Well, I will say I was lucky and unlucky on certain levels. The last 4.5 years of that marriage, my ex had decided that he didn't have to work anymore. He said he was done working. In his early 40s, he didn't have to work anymore. It was my turn to support the family, which I thought was funny because I'd been working since I was a teenager and often held multiple jobs, but he decided it was all on me. Unfortunately, I became very ill somewhere around 2018. I went through multiple tests. He was very angry because of the money that all these doctors and specialists and everything was costing. However, he wasn't the one making the money anymore. And I was suffering dozens of symptoms. At one point,
Physiological symptoms?
Yes.
Yeah.
At one point within a 2-week period, I dropped down to 93 pounds. I had dropped almost 20 pounds for no reason. And I was skeletal. I couldn't breathe. I was blacking out. My hands were going numb. There was so much going on with me that I needed to know what it was. And the long and short of it was that it took a neurologist and a functional medicine doctor to get me with Mayo Clinic. They did a cortisol test. Cortisol is a stress hormone.
Yeah.
You swab your mouth 5 different times, 5 specific times during the day for this test. So Mayo Clinic said, we think the labs are compromised, so we need you to retest because there's no way your levels are this high. So we did a retest, and guess what? They were that high. Levels of cortisol, depending on the time of day, should be somewhere between 100 and 600. Mine were consistently over 2,540 at all times of the day, including in the middle of the night when I had to wake up and swab my mouth. And yes, night times were rough. He would keep me up all night. I was scared to actually fall asleep because I felt like I had to be hyper vigilant and aware because he would come at me when I was vulnerable. So that didn't surprise me. What I was surprised about, however, was that this chronic stress, as the doctors were referring to it, because it had been, this cortisol had been pumping at such high levels through my body for so long, being in fight or flight so often, it had actually caused my white blood cells to think it had to eradicate it. So they actually killed themselves off. So all these different symptoms I was having were autoimmune reactions. And it all resulted in me getting this rare lung syndrome called upper airway resistance syndrome that the doctor said is like having COPD and fibromyalgia all at once, which explains why no other doctors or specialists could figure out the connection between all these things. And this is
100% stress. Yeah, 100% stress like that. That doesn't surprise me. I thought you were going to say, I was expecting to hear fibromyalgia because.
Well, I had a lot of symptoms, and that's
Yeah.
part of this part of this lung syndrome. But I mean, at 45 years old, I had coached cross country for 9 years. I was always that girl that ate an apple for lunch and ate hard-boiled eggs for high protein and, very healthy. I shouldn't be wearing a backpack oxygen machine at 44, 45 years old, struggling to keep my oxygen over 83%.
Wow.
I was having bradycardia, cardiovascular issues. I was having arrhythmia. Other times my muscles would stiffen if I sat more than 10 or 15 minutes. My eyes, I failed neurological exams all the time. It made me a mess. But the key here is that is what it makes me sad that is what made me realize I needed to end that marriage. It wasn't when he swung a crowbar at my head. It wasn't the knife. It wasn't it wasn't all these other things that it should have been. That any girl that had grown up in a nice home and been taught to feel good about herself and have some self-respect would have never tolerated those things. But I hadn't grown up that way. So I thought, well, it'll be better. But he can be good. I was excusing, enabling, and tolerating for the sake of, I'm not sure what, my vows, my kid, my life. I don't know, everything. But my health, that is something I could not get back. And that is something he took from me. And when I realized he could kill me without putting his hands on me, I thought, okay, I'm done with this man. That is when it ends. So unfortunately, that decision and all of this came in February of 2020, right before the shelter in place for COVID. So even though I spoke to an attorney for the 6th time in my marriage, I was ready to file, but the courts closed. We went under the shelter in place. The world was in this pandemic. And I was stuck in the house with this man who had sent me messages and emails that I still have saying that it would be easier if I was dead. So that is when I was officially moved to my basement. I started keeping a journal, a record basically of everything that was being said, everything that was happening, because I was afraid he was going to kill me, make it look like an accident. I mean, it was, I still say it's still surreal to me. Because I've seen these things in movies and on TV. I never thought I would actually live that life. But I was very fortunate, and this is where I got lucky, that when everything reopened that summer, I think he had to know, because I was different and I didn't make any, attempt to hide the way I felt at that point, that I was completely done. So he actually moved out in the middle of the day while my son and I were both at work. We came home, kind of noticed there was stuff missing. The bed was stripped. And that's when I thought to check his closet, and all his clothes were gone. So when I look back, though, it's a typical narcissistic move because they can't handle any offense to their ego. So, I learned very quickly he had left because then he could go around telling everybody. He was telling people that I was abusive and that I harassed him so badly that he couldn't stand to stay there a minute more, thereby excusing his cowardly behavior and excusing his ability to just up and walk away from his wife and kid. So that was it. And I mean, it certainly didn't end there. The story goes on, but fortunately we are no contact at this point, and I'm so much better. Once he moved out, within a month or so, I could breathe without that backpack oxygen machine. My symptoms went away. It's amazing. It was almost a miraculous recovery.
But it's
just
not
getting rid of that toxicity, but it's not, because I will still live with these things. There are still symptoms that I have, and I'll deal with it the rest of you could even hear the scratchiness in my voice. Never smoked anything in my entire life.
Yeah.
And I struggle sometimes to breathe.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying, like, it's not miraculous that many of the symptoms did dissipate because the whole toxin removed,
Exactly.
yeah.
And that was it. And I had to remove my mother and my stepfather. And it all came at once. And unfortunately, in doing that, I lost dozens of family members in one fell swoop with all that. So it was a very difficult time and a very liberating time all at once. But the way I have been able to cope with all of that mourning, because it's essentially what it was to realize, I always say it's kind of like having a garden. I had to pull all those weeds out so that I could grow and blossom into who I was always supposed to be. And I wasn't going to be doing that with all those weeds. It's just unfortunate that there were so many of them.
Did you have to go through a lot of financial devastation?
You know what? Because again, most people would, and I would have. However, because of his mistake, his thinking he was the king and that he could sit at home and make me support the family, I was the breadwinner. So even though I didn't want the house and I didn't want, that was all his stuff, I didn't want anything. I just wanted my kid and I wanted to be done. I would have walked away with nothing. I would have handed everything to him.
Yeah.
But he couldn't, because he had no job. He had nothing. He had no savings. He had, even without telling me, squandered over $100,000 that had been in his 401k from when he did work. So he had kind of, forgive me for saying it, but screwed himself in that way. Because in the divorce, he had no way to even support our son or even provide half of his expenses. So I was already paying the mortgage for how many years? So I had the house, and it was good for my son, though, because my son had one more year of high school left. He wanted to be in his childhood home to finish out before he went off to school in Wyoming. And so it worked out good for us. We were very fortunate that my ex had made that error in his thinking.
But in family law here in Canada, though, it would be half. Like no matter what's going down, you get half the expenses and half the assets. It would be 50-50 split, but that's not.
Every state here, I'm in the States. I live in Illinois. So here, a lot of the states are that way, where it's half and half, unless there's an agreement otherwise. I was just very fortunate that in my case, he signed off on it, no contest. When I went to my lawyer, I said, I don't care. He could have everything but my kid. I don't care if he takes my car, I can replace everything. I just want my kid. But as it turned out, the lawyer just said, She keeps her money. She keeps her income. There's no alimony. I wasn't asking him for child support. I
Yeah.
wasn't asking him for half of the money that he had drained out of his 401k that I would have been entitled
Right.
to, but he didn't have it. And that's what my
Okay.
argument was. He didn't have it to give anyway.
Yeah.
So it worked out. I got my kid full custody. I was also fully financially responsible for him, but that was fine because I was already anyway. I was able to keep his life stable and exactly as it had always been. I was able to pay for him to go away to school,
Yeah.
all on my own. So we
Yeah.
didn't need his dad. And that sounds like a terrible thing to say, but life went on
Yeah.
for us and we were perfectly fine. I
Yeah.
have unfortunately met many people in similar situations that were not in the position that I was in. One in particular that broke my heart. She lived on the streets with her two autistic boys, and had to leave their pets and everything just to save their lives. But you know what? They are good. They're doing
Yeah.
well. They're
Yeah.
established. They're back on their feet. They're in school. They're fed. They're sheltered. They're clothed. So I do always impress that upon people. There are resources in every community, churches, schools, libraries. They all have information to make sure you have a place to rest your head, that you will eat, that you will have clothes. There are even organizations that will foster your pets for you, that will even remove them from the abusive home and foster them until you are able to reconnect with them. So there are options out there. If anybody feels like they're stuck and they want to get out, just know there are people that will help you.
And may I ask, you were once in love with this man. Do you still have love for this man?
Nobody has ever asked me that. So, full disclosure, there are times that I look back and yeah, I miss the good stuff, but I worry and I don't want to live too much in that because I'm not sure it was love on his part. I don't know if it was real or if he was just using me, if I was just a resource. And nobody wants to be a fool. But yeah, there are times I look back and think, what if? What if? Why, I wish that he could have been better. I wish that he would have wanted to be better. Because I didn't get married to get divorced. And I didn't want my kid to come from, a home where his parents divorced. And, yeah. I mean, there are times I miss what I thought we had, but that's the thing. I don't know if it was real.
Okay, so doesn't sound like you have love for this man.
I don't want to say, yeah, I mean, I don't love him. I certainly don't love how he treated me. I just wish it could have been different. And I do have fondness for some memories.
Yeah. Okay. Are you hopeful for your future and your son's future?
Oh my goodness. I am more than hopeful. I feel like in the 3.5 years since the divorce, I am actually astounded at how resilient we are.
Okay.
Because one of the things that happened at the end of my marriage was, when I was kind of having this realization that life with that man was not what I wanted, I asked myself what I did want because he never asked me that, and I'd never stopped to think about it either. And I was very clearly, I always wanted to be a writer. That's what I went to school for. And I knew I always wanted to help victims of abuse. And I knew I wanted to be married. I just didn't want to be married to him. I wanted to have a good, loving marriage. And I am remarried now to somebody I've known his family over 20 years, I think, at this point. But we actually have I didn't think I was capable of a healthy relationship. And I have hiccups once in a while.
Mhm.
I get triggered, or I have some, things from the past that come back and haunt me every now and then. But we have a very, very good relationship, a beautiful marriage. And I love that my son sees a real man and how he treats his wife with respect
Mhm.
and love and tenderness. And he is doing that now in an adult relationship that he has just begun last year. And
Mm.
he bought his first house. My son did when he was 19 years old. He graduated. He has a very good job. So I'm amazed at him, and I'm amazed at me. I've published a book about my experiences. I have two more coming out this year. So we're literally living everything that we could ever imagine and more. And I know that neither one of us would have gone down this route had we remained. So I'm glad things turned out the way they did. And I'm glad, that maybe I just got lucky again with my son, but that he is doing so well. He doesn't have any social or, personal indications of anything that
Yeah,
damaging. So if he does have some things that are unresolved about the past, he sure is hiding them pretty well, but he seems to be doing pretty good.
that's wonderful. Well, Dana, I think this is going to be very helpful for many, many people. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave the audience
Um,
with?
I think just the biggest thing to take away, which we already talked about, is just for people to really, I think that we dwell so much, or people that have been victims dwell so much on why did this person do this to me?
Mm-hmm.
I would just advise they did it. They showed you who they were. They showed you how they felt about you. I think just understand it's their unhealed trauma.
Yeah.
Yes, you have trauma too. You have issues as a result of it, but it was never about you. Do
Mm-hmm.
not carry their shame. Do not carry their shame. You are going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great last advice because again, it's so easy to go to that place of hopelessness and helplessness. So I love that. Well, okay, so we'll link your book in the show notes. And are you available for anybody reaching out directly to you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I always advise people to go to my website, danasdiaz.com. There is a link there to Facebook, Instagram, or you can just email me directly. And I love when people message me. I will actually respond myself. I don't have some automated response or some hired person to do that. I am not a lawyer. I am not a licensed therapist. I can't necessarily give you advice, but I can relate, I can connect, I can direct you. And if anything else, I just love to hear from people. People share their experiences with me all the time. And I love when I hear that somebody is, releasing themselves from these bounds that they thought they were stuck in, and hearing that they're doing better. And we want to hear all that stuff. We want to hear the good, bad, and the ugly, but just for people to know they're not alone.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay. So, as a tradition, the last guest leaves the next guest a question. And the last guest wants you to answer this question. It's what is the last kind act that you've done for yourself that, is sort of new and you're trying to incorporate more and more into your
Oh,
daily
that's
life?
a good one. So I have struggled since my abusive childhood with an eating disorder. So it was kind of almost fitting when I got sick and lost all that weight, because I
Oh,
thought, well, wow, I don't have to overcompensate with exercise or count my calories or starve myself or stick my finger in my mouth. And, because there was always this idea from when I was very young about, don't get fat. Don't get fat. Your hips are widening. You shouldn't eat that bread. You shouldn't be eating pasta, and nobody's going to want you. So, the last kind act, I would say, and this sounds silly, but just before this podcast, I had a cup of hot cocoa because I wanted it. And that sounds silly to
Not
some
at all.
people, but
Yeah.
I'm actually about to cry because I've worked so hard. Sorry. I've worked so hard in the past year to eat when I feel hungry and to not just eat broccoli or lettuce or something that doesn't have calories. I have worked very hard to feel good about myself, even if I have gained some weight, and I've gained 10 pounds in the last year. And so just indulging myself and saying, I feel like hot cocoa because it's cold out today and I want chocolate. I want something sweet. I had it and I'm okay. I'm alive. I'm not 500 pounds. I'm okay. And so I'm proud of myself. And that to me is my ultimate act of self-care.
Oh God, that is so beautiful. Believe me, as a therapist, that like to me, that's probably the most like important message of this whole episode. Like honestly, that is such a good answer. Like I'm just,
Thank you.
yeah, that is amazing. So I really congratulate you
Thank
on
you.
that. That is like unbelievable. That it equates to writing a book. Like, you know, you've done that. Like, I mean, it just shows me how you're healing. And that is so amazing because again, you might think you're the only one dealing with that.
Oh,
And I can
no.
tell you as a therapist, it's unbelievably common because of the body shaming that goes on, you know?
Yes. And I have encountered a lot of people too. I think for a lot of us, I mean, for me, I was shamed about my body, which I never understood because I was always somewhere between 100 and
Tiny.
110 pounds.
My
But
God.
I know a lot of people that have come from abusive situations. It's something you can control. And
Mhm.
that's that narcissistic tendency where you're not a narcissist, but you're trying to control a situation because it makes you feel more comfortable to know what to expect and to know what the outcome, the predictability of it.
That's so important. You mentioned that this is one thing that I can control, and I know that's really the source of anyone, you know, that's dealing with anorexia and any other extreme eating disorder. But I love that, you know, for you to remember that, but now reframe it in the sense that I'm choosing to eat, you know, I'm choosing to give my body nutrition. I'm choosing to give all the wonderful antioxidants that are in chocolate to my body, you know, and I'm choosing to be kind to myself. And like again, you are in control of this. I'm choosing to get well. So I love it.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Okay. So hang on. I'm going to grab a question from you at the end. But yeah, thank you so much for all your vulnerability, for everything you've done, for advocating healing to victims of narcissism like this. And yeah, you're a great human being. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Everyone else, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks once again for joining me on another great episode of I Think I Can podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe below so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And until next week, treat each day like it was your last, because each new day is a privilege that we shan't take for granted. Cheers and have a great week. Bye-bye.